This one is so wild. I don't even know what to say anymore. So I've stopped trying to give understanding because I don't think that it's to be understood. So we're going to look at Andy Stanley. And it is a video of Andy Stanley on a podcast. And so if you look down in the description, I told you to go to dearwokechristian.com. And I've left the link to this podcast. That sounds fun. I've also left the transcript because we're going to look at the transcript today. And I don't understand what Mr. Stanley doesn't understand. I don't know how to say it another way. I don't get what you don't get, Andy. So let me let you hear it. It's only a few seconds. And we're going to look at the transcript so we can see exactly what he said to make sure I didn't take it out of context. So let's get a whirl.
Jesus called out anything that hurt other people. That's how he defined sin. The Christians don't define sin by breaking the 10 Commandments. Christians define sin by anything that is not loving another person the way that God through Christ loved us.
Wow.
So he always called out behavior that hurt other people. Then he...
Andy said that Jesus called out sin only when it hurt other people. Jesus only called out sin when it hurt other people. And we're going to look at it because I think this is a fantastic teaching moment because I've said it before, Andy Stanley should be avoided. But I do actually understand how people mess with Andy Stanley. Andy Stanley promotes his church. He markets his product to people who are illiterate. What I mean by that is Andy Stanley is he would be the used car salesman that markets scooters to people who think they want a motorcycle. So I'm going to give you a scooter because you don't really know what a motorcycle is. So I can tell you that a scooter is a motorcycle. And therefore, he has all these people riding scooters thinking they can, race a Harley down the road. No, you're on a scooter, my friend. Stay in your scooter lane. But he has told them that they have a motorcycle. So they think they have a motorcycle. So they go get the helmet, they got the cool vest, and they're riding around, walking around like they're big stuff. They're going to the biker gang, biker bars and stuff like that, but they're riding a scooter. And that's what Andy Stanley does. He literally is preparing people to be unprepared to interact because they think they're on motorcycles when in fact they are not on motorcycles at all. They're actually on scooters.
Out anything that hurt other people. That's how he defines sin. The Christians don't define sin by breaking the 10 Commandments. Christians define sin by anything that is not loving another person the way that God through Christ loved us.
Wow.
So he called out behavior that hurt other people. Then
so I have no idea where Mr. Stanley got that from. I have no idea. So here is the post. Episode 424, Pastor Andy Stanley, When Church and Politics Collide. I think this is a very dicey topic. And again, the link is on dearwokechristian.com. You can see this transcript as well as the audio podcast as well. If you think about the 3 lanes, Jesus operated in 2 of the 3 lanes. Jesus called out anything that hurt other people. That's how he defined sin. Christians don't define sin by breaking the 10 Commandments. Christians define sin by anything that is not loving another person the way that God through Christ loved us. What do y'all think? What do you think? Do you think that is even remotely faithful to the teaching of God? So let's go look at the scriptures because I think that's a better place to land than anything else. Any place else, please forgive me. Let's jump to let's look at the first place that the 10 Commandments are listed, and that's going to be Exodus 20. Let's go. All right, so look at Exodus 20, verse 1, and these are the 10 Commandments. These are the Big 10, as people like to call it. This is God's law given. The first commandment, the very first commandment. And God said all these words saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. As most of us know, that is the first commandment. You shall have no other gods before me. That doesn't hurt anybody. If I put my cell phone up as God, that does not hurt my wife and kids. So that's not a sin, according to Andy Stanley's new framing of logic. But let us continue. You shall not make for yourself a graven image or likeness of anything that is in heaven or above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For the Lord your God am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. So if I put up my refrigerator as my God, that doesn't impact my neighbors, that does not hurt the mailman. So therefore, following Andy Stanley's twisted logic, that is not a sin. I want you to go back and listen again. That's not a sin, according to Andy Stanley, because it only hurts. Jesus only called out sins that hurt other people. So he says, we'll continue. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord your God will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. That doesn't hurt anybody. That doesn't hurt anybody. Nobody's hurt if I take the Lord's name in vain. Following Andy's logic, and let's go on to the next one. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. 6 days do you work. Shall you labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day, the Sabbath of the Lord your God. Again, how does that hurt anybody? If I work on Sunday, how does that hurt anybody? Yeah, Andy, you stepped in this one right here. And then we can go, of course, we can jump, honor your father and mother. And we're going to talk about all the rest of these, because this is what's called the first table of the law. And then we get into the first table deals with man's relationship with God. So the things that I do with God. And yes, I'm sorry, Andy, those are sins if I violate those. But then the second table of the law are how I deal with my fellow brother and sister. But again, please keep in mind, Andy's standard is that if it doesn't hurt somebody, so they're still going to be, even on this table, well, I didn't murder anybody. Oh, there you go. I'm good to go. I beat the person senseless and drug him behind my scooter, but I didn't kill him. I didn't murder him. So I didn't sin. Following Andy's logic. And then also, let's go also, because the 10 Commandments are also listed in Deuteronomy chapter 5. And we see this a retelling of the 10 Commandments. There's not one thing in here that's different from the first telling. There's no, the Andy Stanley clause. There's no asterisks in here. So it's fair to say that Andy is wrong. Newsflash, right? So let's look at why Andy is wrong. Oh, this didn't even show up. Let's look at why Andy is wrong, because Jesus said something different. Christ said something different. And this is Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount. You're familiar with this. Of course, you've heard the Beatitudes. And then, of course, you are the light of the world. You've heard about that. Christ came to fulfill the law and such of that nature. That's why we don't strive to be righteous in our completion of the law. Christ is our completion of the law. So we are clothed in Christ and he is our righteousness. But let's go to verse 21, because here Christ says something different than what Andy said. Right? Newsflash, that's surprise of the day. Look at what Jesus said. You've heard it said by those of old, you shall not murder. Oh, wait. So he's referring to Exodus and Deuteronomy, talking about the 10 Commandments in the Old Testament. Okay, gotcha. We just talked about that. And whoever murders will be liable of the judgment. Okay, that makes perfect sense. That's what, hey, we're tracking along with you. Jesus got you. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable for judgment. Oh, so if I hold beef if I'm angry at my brother, I haven't murdered him, but Jesus said I'm even guilty if I'm mad at him and angry at him. Oh man. But according to Andy, I didn't hurt anybody. Isn't that what Andy said? Andy said, I'm good to go if I don't hurt him. Huh. I think we got a problem here. Liable of the judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable of the council. Whoever says you fool will be liable for hell. Oh my gosh. I'm angry with them. I insult them and I call them a fool. Man, we're in some deep kimchi. So if you are offering your gifts, and he goes on and talks about how to be reconciled to your brother, so on and so forth. I think Andy had he has a different gospel. Well, okay. Oh, look, Jesus said something about lusting. Let's see what he said. You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. I remember that. That's in the 10 Commandments too, Jesus. Okay, so far we're trending with you, Jesus. We got you. But I say to you that everyone who looks on a woman lustfully, oh my goodness. But I say to you that everyone who looks on a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. But Jesus, I didn't hurt anybody. According to Andy Stanley at North Point Community Church, because I was lusting. But Jesus, you're saying that not only am I sinful, but I've committed the sin of adultery. But Andy said something different. Well, what about divorce? What about divorce? It was said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except for the ground of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery, or remarries a divorced woman, commits adultery. Come on, Jesus. Andy said I didn't hurt nobody. We agreed, irreconcilable differences. We decided to just go our separate ways. But you're setting up a standard, Jesus, that I can't keep. And Andy Stanley was trying to lower the standard. Come on, Jesus, give me a break. Look at this one. Again, I tell you, you have heard that it was said of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. Okay, it's not in the 10 Commandments, but I think I understand it. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make your head make one hair white or black. Let what you say simply be yes or no. Anything comes from evil. Come on, Jesus. I mean, really? It didn't hurt anybody if I swore an oath. So if I gave him like a sort of kind of maybe possibly, but not really answer, Jesus, it's okay, right? Why high standard that I can't perform? Because Andy made it super duper easy for me to feel like I was doing the right things. But Jesus, you're making me miserable. You're ruining my self-righteous sanctification, Jesus. Because Andy Stanley was telling me that I'm good to go because I didn't hurt anybody. But Jesus's standard is completely different. Why is that? Why is Jesus's standard different than Andy Stanley's standard? Why? I wonder why. This was a very interesting sermonette. And again, it's just a clip out of the entire message, and you're welcome to check it out. And I just want to make sure I didn't. So let's just last time.
Jesus called out anything that hurt other people. That's how he defined sin.
So Jesus defines sin as anything that hurt other people. But that's not what this says here.
Don't define sin by breaking the 10 Commandments. Christians define sin by anything that is. So he always called out behavior that hurt other people. Then
Why did it break? Oh, stop right there. Yeah, so this was really interesting because I have no clue what Mr. Stanley's talking about. I have no earthly clue where he's getting that from. But again, this is yet another example of Andy Stanley playing footloose and fancy free with the scriptures. And again, he's created his own law. Andy has become his own law unto himself, because scriptural law, that's not a biblical law, that Jesus only called out sin when it hurt other people. There's countless examples of that. And I just looked at the Sermon on the Mount, but we have tons of examples where Jesus, following that logic then, when Satan tempted Jesus, those weren't temptations because he didn't hurt anybody. When Satan said fall down and worship, that didn't hurt anybody. So therefore, if Jesus had fallen down and worshiped Satan in the temptations of Christ, then that wouldn't have been a sin. I'm just asking a question. Let's do this. Since Andy doesn't even believe in Adam and Eve, how did Adam and Eve sin? They didn't hurt anybody. I'll wait. How did Adam and Eve sin? They didn't hurt anybody. They just ate an apple. They were on a special diet. They didn't hurt anybody, Andy. So they didn't sin. So what are we talking about? Nobody was hurt. In the first person being hurt was when Cain killed Abel. That was clearly somebody hurt. Adam and Eve didn't sin following Andy's logic because they didn't hurt anybody. Please tell me I'm making that up. I didn't hear that correctly. Somebody asked, somebody hit me up and sent me this video about Andy Stanley right before the live stream. So I was like, let me look at it. And I was getting some Bible verses together, and it was actually pretty terrible. So if you go to dearwokechristian.com, I left the link to the podcast as well as the transcript so you can see. I don't want you to think I'm taking Andy out of context and whatnot. He's talking about when politics and religion collide, or politics and the church collide. Pretty interesting. I didn't have a chance to listen to the whole interview. However, I thought it was interesting because that section, Andy is saying here, and I'll bring it back up again. Andy is saying that, you know what? Let's let him say it.
Jesus called out anything that hurt other people. That's how he defined sin.
Jesus defined sin as anything that hurt other people. So how did Adam and Eve sin?
The Christians don't define sin by breaking 10 commandments. Christians define sin by anything that is not loving in the way that God through Christ loved us.
Wow.
So we define sin as anything that is not loving another person as Christ has loved us, as God has loved us through Christ. Really?
He always called out behavior that hurt other people.
Jesus always called out behavior that hurt other people. So again, going back to the temptation of Christ, if Jesus had following this logic, if he turned the stone to bread, would he have been a sinner? Would he have sinned if he had done that? Would he? Because he didn't hurt anybody. Following Andy Stanley's logical conclusion. And then again, when Satan said, all these kingdoms I'll give to you, want to worship me, who would he have hurt if he had done that? Following Andy Stanley's statement here, who would he have hurt? Nobody. So would it have been a sin? Just wonder. I don't understand how Andy's gotten away with this, but here we go. All right, let's check out a couple comments. I do have some good questions for you all today, some comments for you all today as well. But let's go. So Mark said that Ann is doing a Steve Schultz. She does sound like Steve Schultz. I'm gonna list the whole thing, but she does sound like him. I know exactly what you're talking about. Sin is anything that violates the holiness of God. Thank you, Susie Q. But according to Andy, that's not the case. I feel like we need a heaping helping of R.C. Sproul's "What's wrong with you people?" speech. You know what? I need to add that to my soundboard. Thank you so much. I need to add that. I don't have that as a sound effect. Thank you so much, Susie Q, for dropping the link in Andy Stanley clause. That's actually pretty funny, Mark. That's actually pretty funny. That one, I'm gonna have to put a little star by that one. That one might come back. The Andy Stanley clause. I think that might actually come back again. Reminds me of a cup I saw for "Dear Lord, lead me not into temptation. I can find it myself." There you go. But then what is the temptation if it doesn't hurt anybody else? So if I'm just living, I don't even know how this plays out. So if I'm a hermit living on the side of a mountain, just minding my business off the grid, am I ever sinning? I don't understand. That is so weird. Yeah, Andy needs to whole stop. We critiquing Andy Stanley. Where did this start? So I was just looking. I've called out Andy Stanley multiple times. Andy, I think Andy has a whole playlist on my channel. But it was just somebody sent me a link literally right before the live stream. And I said, we've got to talk about this. It's been a great week. Thank you, Bishop of the Railway. The Whitaker Talk Show is now texting me. How does someone call themselves a Christian but not believe in Adam and Eve? I don't know. Andy Stanley said, Adam and Eve, you might not believe in Adam and Eve. So Adam and Eve might be a part of a myth. So I don't know. I have no idea. Andy's got a lot of work to do. But I'm glad that people are paying attention to where Andy is, and they see when he put out the book Unhinged and all that kind of stuff like that, I think it really caused people to say, wait, what? And they're paying attention to him and they're watching his trajectory. That's the thing I think Andy really hates, is that people are watching where you're going. They see where you're trending. So they see, was it 3 years ago, the book was Unhinged and all that kind of stuff. And we really don't need even the epistles. All we need is the resurrection and such like that. That's all you really need. But now everything else is called into question, everything else. So I think there's really a lot of problems there. How can he not know the definition of sin? I don't know. He went to Georgia State. A special diet, that made me laugh. Hey, I'm here for it. I'm here for the laughs. Sin is any thought or action that doesn't meet God's standard of perfection. Amen. But according to Stanley, it's only if I hurt somebody. You heard him say it. So I'm not making it up. He literally said the transcript and the podcasts are on my channel, dearwokechristian.com, on my page, so you can see them. He said it. He said it only matters that it hurts somebody. That's what Jesus said. So our standard as Christians is only if I hurt somebody. So, technically, if I don't hurt anybody, I can do just about anything. As long as I don't say anything to anybody while I'm doing it. I can do a lot of things. I can speed. I don't hurt anybody if I speed. I can steal. Technically, I guess I can steal from the grocery store because I'm not hurting anybody. What'd you say, baby donkey? Andy Stanley doesn't believe the Old Testament should be connected to the New Testament. That's right. That's how he doesn't have to believe anything in the Old Testament, like Adam and Eve. There you go. I don't understand. But I did a video talking about Andy Stanley and myths. And if the Old Testament didn't happen, you do realize that Christ thought that Adam and Eve existed. He thought that Adam existed, and Noah and Jonah and all these other key figures in the Old Testament, David, and such of that nature. Christ mentioned them. So if they didn't really exist and they were myths, that would mean that Jesus Christ was lying to us about these people's existence and their role that they played in the story, the prophetic narrative that brought us Christ. So Isaiah was a myth. Daniel was a myth. If you follow that logic all the way out, that we don't need the Old Testament, Jesus's life doesn't even make sense. I don't understand. I don't understand how people sit under this and listen to this. Are Andy fans called Andy Stans? Gosh, you all are killing me tonight. Bishop and Mark, you guys are Andy Stans. Goodness gracious. That is hilarious. Oh, but you're killing me. But notice you didn't hurt me. See what I did there? All right. We need some Don Knox, Andy memes. We're going to be playing. Okay, I might need to look into those because I was talking about memes earlier today. So that would be hilarious. All right. So let's shift gears off of Andy Stanley because good gravy. That was ridiculous. I don't even understand. And this is my last part. I know I just said I'm going to shift off to Andy. Andy Stanley really shows you this is what happens when you don't fully think out your theology. We've talked about Marcus Rogers. We talked about countless other people that I don't think have thought about what they actually believe. Like, do you really believe that sin is anything that hurts another person? Is that really what you believe? Can you explain how you came to that conclusion? I don't think he's thought that out. Most of the people that have commented in here, it seems like right here, I'm going to pick on Susie real quick. It seems like Susie has thought out her theology or the doctrine of sin. Because she said sin is anything that violates the holiness of God. That's a very nice, clear, and concise answer. Because ultimately, as David said he sinned against God. Slept with Bathsheba before he had Uriah killed. And then, so David, in his repentance in Psalm 51, which is a part of the Old Testament, Andy, he says, I've sinned against you, God, and you alone. So all these other people really are just byproducts. It is fallout. But ultimately, he sinned against God. So I don't believe that Andy Stanley has taken the time to consider and to think about what he actually believes and what are the ramifications of this belief or this doctrine or this thought or this theology. I don't think he's done that. It's pretty clear in my mind that he's unqualified. Not only is he unqualified, he's uneducated in the matters of the Christian doctrine and the Christian faith. Now, I know I'm right here in Atlanta, and he's right up the street and around the corner a piece. He can catch me outside. I'm perfectly fine with that. But it won't change anything. It won't change one thing, that you're teaching doctrines and ideologies that are false, that are wrong, that give people a wrong perception of the Christian faith. Like, what does that do? Like, can you imagine somebody saying, oh, it's okay for me to be in lust because it doesn't hurt anybody. It's okay for me to redefine marriage because it doesn't hurt anybody. It's okay if I'm full of pride and self-idolatry and I can be outwardly idolatrous. It doesn't hurt anybody. Like, that is insane. That is insane. But that's what he said. So if you just think about it, just take the time to think, what are the ramifications of this? But you could do this even in a very basic sense. I don't believe Andy Stanley has been challenged to think about what will be the outcome of this type of foolishness and ignorant teaching that he espouses. Now, granted, the little lady that was on the podcast, she's giving the yummy sounds, ooh, wow, all that kind of stuff like that. She needs to sit down too. But Andy is responsible for this. This is his teaching. He literally said that. Go to dearwokechristian.com. You can see the podcast as well as the transcript. So he did that. The woman, now granted, she should know better. She should be better trained and educated to say, wait, that doesn't make sense, because Jesus said that lustful thoughts are sin. That doesn't hurt anybody. So why? Following Andy's logic, then two unmarried people having sex is not a sin because it doesn't hurt anybody. They're good with it. They're fine. They're consenting adults. They're not married, so they're not violating their marriage vows, following Andy's logic. So they're good to go.